You're welcome back to the conversation in News Central Television. And our first topic of discussion this evening is the resignation of South Africa's Deputy President David Mabuza. And joining us to unpack this latest development in South Africa, we have Sisman Motlong, a political science lecturer at Northwest University in Vanderbilt Park. Welcome again, Sisman.
Hi, can you hear me then?
Yes, I can hear you. Now, Sisman, can you take us through David Mabuza's background and political journey which led to his appointment as the Deputy President of South Africa?
No, Mr. Mabuza is a well-known politician. I think a person who is established in the movement. He has been a premier of the Mpumalanga province. And what we have seen him doing was somebody who became dominant in the province and who grew up through the ranks of the movement himself. And he became, as a premier, I think this is when he became very notable in the national politics, until such time that he would become a person who would deputize Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. And through his ascendance, he also became popular by this name of a cat, because he seems to be a person who has survived politically, and recently he has also survived several accidents, car accidents, and also a suspicion of a poisoning. Because of that, he is to some extent seen also as a person who, if we talk about the morality of politics as violence or as war, he is also notorious around that. It is alleged that he is behind, or is somebody you cannot mess with, because he's behind certain ordering of assassination. So if it's not an assassination, you deal with your political opponents, to disable them. And when it came to become a deputy, this is also speaking to that nature of a cat, of a very shrewd person, because he was going for presidency. And at the 11th hour, he somehow struck a deal with Mr. Ramaphosa to give him the votes of the province, so that Mr. Ramaphosa could become a president and to beat Mayor Nkosazana Zuma. So this is how he became, I think, somebody who entrenched himself in national politics as a deputy president.
Now, Sisman, what were the circumstances and details surrounding Mabuza's resignation from the position of deputy president, and what motivated his departure?
No, at this moment, there isn't anything scandalous or mischievous that led him to leave his office. It is mainly a political culture of ANC. You remember ANC had as a governing party, had its national elective conference last year around December, and Mr. Mabuza could not make it as deputy or as any executive position. Now, Paul Mashatile became a deputy president of the governing party. As per ANC traditions, the person who is a deputy president of the party would automatically become, or it is expected that he becomes the deputy president of the country. And because of that development, Mr. Mabuza is publicly known to have said he is a disciplined cadre, and because of Mr. Mashatile coming through, he wants to vacate and open up space for him. So this is mainly him heading to that. And I think others would look at that. He doesn't want to stay in office for long, to a point of being pushed out when Mashatile comes in office, as if he's defying, compared to Mr. Zuma previously when Mr. Ramaphosa was elected president. Mr. Zuma wanted to continue as president of the country for a few more months. And this is what members of the NC could not tolerate. He in a way had to be pushed out. So Zuma was reluctant to vacate office, but Mabuza here, we see him willingly opening up space to avoid that kind of a confrontation.
Okay, thank you very much for that, giving us that important background as to the inner workings of the ANC. Now, you mentioned the incoming Deputy President, Paul Mashatile. What are his qualifications, what are his antecedents, his experience in politics, and how important is it for President Ramaphosa to choose someone who's seen as a unifying force within the government and broader South African society?
Here, it is not even so much about Mr. Ramaphosa choosing. You know, he has been given a deputy president of the party, and that person is expected to become his deputy now in the state. Mr. Paul Mashatile was a former premier of Gauteng province, and he is also known to be a shrewd politician himself, and to earn the nickname of an Alexandra Mafia, or part of the Alexandra Mafia, which is a group of politicians who are from Alexandra. And he's associated with this Alexandra Mafia because in his tenure as a premier, one of the negative aspects of his premiership was the kind of urban renewal projects that were earmarked for Alexandra that could not materialize. And he is seen currently as a person where the political party is really divided by factions. Mr. Mashatile did not really side outright with a particular faction. He is more neutral, and because of being neutral, he seems to have managed to gather support for himself across the country. When we come to a national elective conference of the ANC, he seems to have had big support. And at some point, it was believed that he can even surpass Mr. Ramaphosa. If he was more ambitious, he could have contested for the presidency, but he did not do that. I think it's also on this respect and anticipation that after Mr. Ramaphosa, he would come. So he has been playing his game in a very wise manner, as has been known from the process of being a premier. Then he came in the executive of the ANC to also play a role when the party was weak, in aspect of being a treasurer general, secretary, balancing in the party in that manner. So he's a go-to person who is very experienced in the inner workings of the movement. So he's a senior person in the party.
Okay, a senior person in the party, quite shrewd, but I want to take you back to what you mentioned about projects that did not materialize during his premiership. Was this as a result of, was it a fault of his lack of foresight and management? And what reasons were given for the projects not seeing the light of day?
Now, these issues, when we come to maladministration in the province or municipal level, you cannot really blame on one person. And in a unique manner, we see this being done in the Free State province. There is a premier, Ace Magashule, who was ambitious to become a premier, to become a president of the ANC. And he was earmarked, pointed directly as a premier to when there was misallocation of funds in his province. The court said, you should have done something about it. But the likes of Mashatile, when there was malappropriation of funds, we don't see a similar kind of things. Maybe it's a point of that it was not even taken to court. But at that time, you could not really bear a responsibility on one person. The ANC has this aspect they call a collective responsibility. So it would be premier, cabinet, and to some extent the executive in the state departments. The Alexandra project, no one can really say what happened to those funds. A similar project is called Everton Renewal Project, which was even in that time when President Mbeki was the leader of the state. It cannot be said what happened to the funds to renew Alexandra, to renew Everton. And in that regard, do you blame a premier at the Gauteng? These two areas are all in Gauteng. But at some point, you have also to put it to the president that Mbeki was there. What did Mbeki do about it? So it's an issue of institutional design and who should be accountable for malpractices in the public sector.
And also maladministration. Now, let's go back to the events of December last year when the ANC held its all-important conference. Sisman, can you explain the impact of the ANC leadership elections in December of 2022 on the political future of South Africa? That was where Paul Mashatile emerged as deputy president. How do you see the power dynamics within the ruling ANC changing in the wake of the event of last year, December? Are there potential risks and challenges for the government as we move ahead?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Sisman, go ahead, please.
Okay. What we see in the politics of the ANC, in my view, I would compare ANC as a buffer, as a cushion. From South Africa, when we see a certain countries in Africa where it would be inter-party conflict, we see certain members of that group fighting another from a different political party, and then we have a civil war, even at an ethnic level. What I see is that the ANC is a cushion for such kind of conflicts. The conflicts that could have spilled over as ethnic violence or civil happen within the party and not in a violent manner. We see it happening through these contestations, and to some extent, they become violent in the political killings. When you see in the provinces like Mpumalanga, KZN, there are certain people who are being killed. And certain leaders of the ANC have spoken out that our members are killing us. This is intra-party conflict in terms of killings. Certain councillors being killed because somebody wants to be the next in line or because there was no state tender provided. Those kind of conflicts for resources. But now, for me, it's a positive thing. And we've had also some politicians in the ANC saying, if the ANC is out of power, the country will be in crisis. I don't know if they mean that level of there would be violence or not, but then we see the significance of the ANC in that sense that it is a big power shaper in our politics. And now with Mr. Mashatile coming in, we see in a way a disciplined, a very calm person who is not divisive. He is saying, I'm coming in at a time where restructuring a political party that is fractured with divisions and ideological disagreements. And he wants to, I think, in my view, somebody who appears to be supporting Mr. Ramaphosa on this project of renewing the movement and stabilizing governance in South Africa. So I don't think there's a visible power contestation in the party there. That semblance of unity is coming, and this is what I think many will appreciate. There's not so many people who are really saying in the ANC who are saying Ramaphosa must go or Ramaphosa must fall, as it was happening through somehow Mbeki, somehow
Jacob
Mr. Zuma.
Yes.
So now there is that kind of a stability. The only thing, and which has also appeared during their elective conference, was how ANC sees itself in the general political landscape. That next year in the national elections, ANC is already speaking about a possibility of a coalition at the national level. So based on the service provision and its performance in government, there is that diminished trust, and it may impact them in terms of the outcome of the election.
And that brings me to my next question, Sisman. And I'm happy that you mentioned that the ANC doesn't appear fractured like it used to be in the past under Mbeki and also former President Jacob Zuma. President Ramaphosa seems to have a more united front to work with. But countrywide, I mean, he's not president of ANC alone, he's president of the Republic of South Africa. Countrywide, the current challenges, serious challenges that the ANC is facing, such as blackouts, record number of unemployment, poverty. How can these issues, or how how will they impact the future of the party and the country? And what impact will they have on South Africa's choice for the next elections in 2024? You know, it has a united party to some extent, but then the country is going through so many challenges. So how will this play out politically as the country inches towards the 2024 elections?
Yeah, as you've seen, I'm struggling to talk to you now because there's a blackout in my area, this load shedding schedule. I have to make means to see how we speak here. And this is the frustration of many people. Ordinary people are also complaining about, in terms of this electricity crisis, that they might need to preserve critical medication in the refrigerators, and when this electricity is not there, it may affect their health. We've also seen in the public health sector, some hospitals had to really struggle in the ICUs and in the operating theaters. And then we have businesses that are struggling to operate because of this load shedding. They're losing financially. It is not becoming feasible to do business anymore. That's on the aspect of electricity.
Yes.
Then you come to an aspect of basic service delivery. Electricity, because there's that blackout, it would affect the articulation of water services, where certain water utility can no longer pump water to the reservoirs, fill reservoirs. We're becoming challenged on that side. And there is a basic aspect of sewage systems, where most townships now, it's becoming a normal sight that you have a sewage leaking and municipality does not come to service. And we have a high number of municipalities that are dysfunctional. I think we could say technically collapsed, and they need provincial intervention or at a national intervention. Therefore, the state of governance is bad. Some could even say South Africa, I heard one leader even saying today, South Africa is like the Titanic, is like that sinking ship. Unless something is done drastically, we may sink to the bottom.
Now, Sister, talking about salvaging this ship and doing something about this Titanic, preventing it from sinking, what specific changes are expected to occur as part of the upcoming cabinet reshuffle? And how would this affect the government's ability to deliver results for the South African people? Are there any particular areas of focus that are likely to receive increased attention as part of this process? And is there time?
This aspect we're talking about, electricity, basic services, what you see is when a particular minister is going into the town, now the roads will be paved, the potholes will be filled, water supply will be sustainable, waste will be collected, just to present that impression. And when they are gone, it is back to that order of a poor governance and poor service delivery. This is what needs to be considered. When we had in Parliament, one of the IFP leaders in Parliament was responding to Mr. Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address, and he says, be firm, be a strong leader, be willing to dismiss a minister who's not performing. Don't add somebody who will aid and support a non-performing minister. What Mr. Ramaphosa has been failing to do is being decisive in terms of holding his ministers accountable, being decisive in holding premiers and mayors at that level on the aspect of service delivery. I think any voter would want to see their community provided with services. And then we can go to those other aspects of job creation, which Mr. Ramaphosa has been talking about, attracting investment. But the normal person in the street would say, where is that money translating to a job in my space, and a sustainable job, not this kind of state-sponsored jobs where young people are taken to a school for a year to assist teachers, or these public works projects that last only a year and then you are unemployed afterwards. People are looking for sustainable jobs, and this is where South Africa is struggling. Now, when you talk about reshuffling and restructuring government, I don't see any different thing ANC would do. It is an old system, and we will struggle with that. I think the voter could have to look to an alternative of a political party. Which other political party could they bring in to provide a better vision and a better service for them?
So you're not optimistic, Sisman, that the cabinet reshuffle will bring about any positive change. And talking about pessimism, the President of the Republic of South Africa yesterday, the State of the Nation addressed a debate in Parliament, did clamp down on members of the opposition that he called agents of pessimism. He said, you know, the government has done positives, but you shouldn't focus on the negative, that they should provide solutions. In your expert opinion, Sisman, what can we expect to see in the future developments of South African politics, given the changes in leadership and the current political landscape? What do you see? What do you envision for the future?
I think what we can see now in terms of what's happening in the ANC, what we can expect from them is that it will be some time before the ANC is in, let's say, the ANC is out of power completely. What we could think, in my view, we see more young people coming through the system of the ANC at an executive or top leadership. Now, this is a hopeful development. And
do you see a coalition government, perhaps?
It is possible. We hear talk about that, but me personally, I don't think the ANC will be in a coalition, let's say from next year, maybe after the next year term. Possibly next year, they will have something like a 50%, 51, maybe 53.
Slight majority.
By that, yeah, but I don't think they will need a coalition in the next year because of the performance of opposition parties. You see in terms of voter apathy, people asking, NC is failing me, but I don't know who to vote for as an alternative. There's mistrust in terms of DA because it seemed to be a white, there's now racial politics coming through. Then the EFF is seen to be too radical.
Extreme, yes.
For people to trust them. And then you see the likes of Action SA emerging and other movements emerging. So it should take us a bit of maybe 10 years for these political parties to really gain the trust of the electorate. For me, it is still too early, but the sure sign is that the ANC is losing its dominance.
I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Sisman, and also to ESCOM for restoring your power so you can have a good night rest. Sisman Mabuza, political science lecturer at Northwest University in Vanderbilt Park, South Africa. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for your time and insight.
Thank you. Keep well.